if people are joining in, let them join in, because like you said, the link was disconnected and then continued again.
Yes, sir.
So let's continue with the session and take it forward.
Yeah.
All right. Let me share my screen, and this is what we had done in the last class, where we had tried out iDisposable, and due to you all not asking me the right question, we had not finished the exam. So let's quickly complete that example, and then I'll go ahead with what I have planned for the day. So this is what you had. We had created an iDisposable, and we saw that when you have a class that implements iDisposable, you can put into a using block, and at the end of the using block, automatically what gets called is the dispose method. So whatever resources that you're freeing will be released immediately at the end of the using blocks. So anything that is resource intensive should be put into a using block. Anything that is using resources and wants to be released immediately as soon as it's not being used, such object should be put into a using block. So the dispose is called immediately when it is no longer required. All right, now let's assume I'm not using a using block. Let's say I'm not using a using block, and I'm on my own, I'm writing code like this, o.dispose. What if I'm doing something like this? Now, what am I doing actually on this line right now? Of course, I'm doing a console.write line. So it's not very critical code right now. But in reality, I will be releasing the resources that that object is holding. Now, after dispose is called, should I be allowed to do something like this again? Should I be allowed to do something like this again?
No.
No, sir. No, sir.
Right? So although, syntactically it is allowed, the compiler doesn't stop me from doing this, right? This is a flaw in your, code if you're going to allow something like this, which means that even after the object has been, has disposed its resources, you're still trying to call some function, and that function might be now using those resources. So once dispose is called, I don't want it to be called. Right now, of course, it works. So if you run this code now, if you run this code out here, you'll find that the dispose code was called, but even after that, it is allowing you to call display. So I want to prevent that from happening. I don't want something like this to happen. Now, how do I take care of this situation? There is no inbuilt mechanism for taking care of this. You have to write code to take care of the situation. So see what I'm doing in this class. I have just made a copy of that class, the same class that I had yesterday. I made a copy of that with a few additional changes here. So one change that I have here is I'm keeping track of whether or not a object has been disposed. And to keep track of that, I'm keeping a Boolean variable called isDispose, right? Which initially would be set to false. So your Boolean variables by default are initialized to false. Now, every time a dispose happens, what am I doing out here? This is just like a flag. All that I'm doing here is what? What am I doing here on line 71?
So keeping it to true.
Making it to true. So now, which means that dispose has been called once and my flag has been set to true. And then I have a function here which checks whether it is disposed. If it is disposed, what am I doing? If it is disposed once, then what am I doing here in this case?
Throwing an exception.
Throwing an exception. So there's an inbuilt exception called object dispose exception, and I'm throwing that. Now this method for check for dispose, is being called from whatever other methods I have written here. So in this case, display is first calling for what? Check for dispose. Dispose also, I should not be able to call dispose also twice. Dispose also is doing what? First, check whether the object has been disposed of. So if the object has not been disposed, then it will go and write down, it will complete the rest of the code. But if the object was already disposed, then it will throw an exception. And this I've done in actually class 2. I have not done it in class 1. So class 1 is as you had coded yesterday. So let me just make a copy of this, and instead of class 1, we'll use class 2. So this is just the same class with slightly different code. And if you try doing this, now this would work fine. Work fine meaning it will not allow display to be called again. Right? So it throws an object dispose exception saying cannot access the disposed object. So this sort of completes the code that I wanted to show you with dispose. Are we clear on this, everybody? All right. So I'll upload this code a little later, but there is a change in this, in this example or in this project. So just remember to update your own code accordingly. I've done this in day 4 itself. I've not made a new folder. All right, so let's start with what we have planned for today. And we are on day 5 right now. So I'm creating a new solution. The first thing that we're going to try out here is arrays in .NET. Okay, just one note of caution. I saw this in the lab. Supposing you're creating, the topic is arrays. Now I have called it arrays. But if some of you call your project as array, A-R-R-A-Y, singular array. Now there would be existing classes in .NET that may have the same name, right? And when you create your namespace having the same name as the existing class, then the preference is given to your existing namespace. So for example, if I now, if there's an existing class called array, if I did array dot, it will not show me that existing class. It will show me what? It will show me the namespace that I've written out here. So just the word of caution, when you're giving your project names, do not use, keywords that might be already having, like existing classes. All right. So that was an error that I saw with some of you all in the lab. All right. So let's talk about arrays in .NET. You would have done arrays before in C++ and in Java. So nothing has changed from the concept of why you use arrays. So I will focus on, whatever the little differences that might be there or slight changes that you have out here. Instead of having to declare multiple variables having different names, all right? Alternate option is to create an array of variables. The advantage of using an array is that all these variables will have the same name, but a different subscript. And you can, iterate through them using a loop by just changing the subscript out there, index of the subscript out here. Okay. When you create an array in .NET, all arrays inherit from the array class. So there's an existing class called array, and all arrays that you create inherit from the array class. So it gets all the properties and methods that the array class has. The array class itself is an abstract class. So you can't create an object of the array class, right? Any array that you create, this array inherits from that array class. Like for example, if I had to create an integer array, syntax would be as follows: int square brackets ARR. When you read this as ARR, read it from right to left. ARR is this is the notation for an array. So ARR is an array of integers. Now there is no inbuilt class called integer array. There's no inbuilt class called integer array. But when you write code like this, it is creating a derived class of the array class, which is an integer array. So this here int square brackets is a derived class of the array class. And ARR is a reference of this derived class. The array class would get all, would have all the properties and methods, and this would get all those properties and methods out here through the base class. If you look at the array class itself, right? If you look at the array class itself, class system.array, right? Right? If you look at array class, this array class is an abstract class, right? So you can't create an object of the array class. Are we clear on this? All right. Let me complete this. To specify the size of the array, you would specify that by saying new int of square brackets of whatever the size of the array. In this case, I'm just creating an array of size 5. Okay. Let's loop through this and accept elements into the array. To loop through this, I'm using a for loop for int I is equal to 0. Now, what are these array elements numbered? How are they, how are they accessed? They'll be accessed as ARR of 0 up to ARR of 4. So if the array size is 5, the last element would be 4 because it begins with 0. So help me run a loop through this for int I equal to 0, I less than, instead of length, I will take this as what?
ARR.length.
Right. And instead of hard coding the values, you would have properties. So length is a property that is available for the, we're telling you number of elements that you have in the array. The length itself is of type int. The length is of type int. So what if your array size is so big that the number of elements in an array are larger than an int? Now, in such a case, you can pick up the long length. And long length is what? What is the data type of long length? Look at this.
Long.
So this also, both length and long length both give you the same value. But long length returns an long, whereas length returns an integer. So let's see this array.length. Let me write something which says enter element, enter ARR. Now I want to print something like this, ARR of, and I want it to print 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 out here. Now one way of doing this is I use a placeholder. So this curly bracket 0 is called as a placeholder. The placeholder is basically just holding the place for something else. So something else is going to replace this. I'm saying enter ARR of 0. Right? And this curly bracket 0 will be replaced with the variable I. Right? This curly bracket 0 will be replaced with the variable I. Sorry, I was getting a call. Are we clear on this, everybody? How this works? Have we done this before? I don't think I've shown you this example before. Have I shown you this example here?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. So placeholders allow you to replace, the value with a variable that you're giving after this. So all your, after your comma is over, all your variables can be given. So this is like if you're using, if I had to give you an example of, let's say C. If you said %C, printf %C, %D. Instead of %C, %C also were examples of placeholders. Instead of that, you're using what? Curly bracket 0. So curly bracket 0 is the first placeholder. The second placeholder will be curly brackets 1. Curly brackets 2 will be the third placeholder, and so on and so forth. So if you want to display 4 variables, you will use curly brackets 0, curly brackets 1, curly brackets 2, curly brackets 3. Right? So let me run this and then you will see how it looks. All right, to accept the array element itself, what are we doing? ARR of I is equal to console.readline. ARR of I is returning an integer. So what do you need to do here in this case?
Convert it into integer. Integer.parseInt.
Convert.int32.
Have I covered this with you? I don't remember. Frankly, I'm
No,
doing
sir.
one more batch.
No, sir.
So I showed you an int.parse.
No, sir.
Not yet.
No, sir.
All right. So this is for accepting something from the user. To accept it, you need to accept it with console.readline. Just like you did a console.writeline to write something to the console. To accept from the console, you would do console.readline. Now console.readline returns a string. The return type of console.readline is a string. But on my left hand side, I have an integer. So int.parse takes a string as a parameter and parses it and converts it to an integer. So this is one way of doing this. The other way of doing it, the same thing I'm doing. I'm showing you another way of doing this. There's a class called convert, right? And this class convert offers you all possible conversions that you can think of. So there are certain methods here. So if you look at convert.to, you'll find that there are all possible conversions possible. So convert.to boolean, to byte, to car, to date time, to decimal, to double, to int 32, to int 16, int 64, to s byte, to single, to string, all right? And then again the unsigned options out there. So you have all possible options out here that you can convert from one to the other. In this case, of course, I want to convert to an integer in 32. And if you look at convert.to in 32 itself, look at the overloads. It's got 19 overloads. So you can convert from different types to different types. One of the options there, of course, is a string. So you could have used either of the two. You could either have used the int.parse. Now, int.parse is a very specific one. Converting what? Converting a string to an integer. Or convert.to in 32. Okay. Now, if you remember convert dot, if you remember that one option, you're taken, most of your conversions are taken care of. So I will request you to remember convert dot to whatever. Remember that. Now between the two, int.parse is faster. Because convert.to in 32 somewhere inside will be calling a int.parse. So int.parse is faster, but then you'll have to remember these specific options. Like if you want to convert to a decimal, then you'll have to do a decimal.parse. And then each one has its own ways of working. So if you remember the first option, great, fantastic. But the second option, 100% I wanted to remember. Don't forget the second option. You can do it either way. All right, so I'll keep it back to int.parse, but be aware that there is also convert.to in 32 available. So this is accepting the array elements. Let's display the array elements. For displaying the array elements, I can either use a for loop or I could use a for each loop. The for loop relies on the subscripts. The for each loop, of course, is an iterator that goes through all the elements in a collection. So let me do it first with the for loop because I want to show you a few other things also. Right? So how do I, display this now? Console.writeLine, and let's just say array of, what is this taking now? Curly bracket 0. What will this take? Value of I, and then I want to actually print the value in the array. So I'm giving that as curly brackets 1, and this would be ARR of I. So how would this work? I will go into what? I will go into what?
1. 0, sir.
No,
0.
not 1. The
Zero,
first
zero.
parameter. First parameter is 0. And ARR of I will go into what?
1.
Into the second placeholder. That's this one. Are we clear on this? So this is what I'm using to display the array elements. I want to show you one more option also, but let me first show you this. So let's run this. I don't want to enter 5 values and make it smaller. 3 values. Okay. I have to enter 5 values otherwise. So when you are in the lab, you can try 50, size 50. I'm making it small for me. So enter ARR of 0. Let's say 1, 2, and 3. This is what I'm entering. And these values, this is how it's printing the values. Clear on this so far?
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yes.
In line number 24, the 0 and 1 is position of number of placeholders. Like if we use 3 placeholder, then we have to use 0, 1, 2 like that.
Correct.
Can we use first add the 0, 1 and add the 1, 2?
Yeah.
Like that.
The order of the placeholders. Huh?
Yes.
What you're saying is, what if I did this? What if ARR of I was first and I was second?
No.
This.
If I place one number at 0 in 24,
So
where
see what I've done now. I have placed what ARR of I have placed first.
yes,
And I have placed second. Now I have reversed order. So now this will be what? This will be 1 and this will be 0.
okay,
Is that what your question is?
yes, sir.
Okay.
And what if I use 1 and 2
Array,
instead of
you
0
can't.
and
You have to start with 0.
okay,
That's the, that's how it recognizes it. So if here, if I had used 1 and 2, then 2 would have given you an error saying that there's no third element is not there.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Now let's make this in an
Hello.
alternate way. Yes.
Hello, sir. At a time, sir, we can give only one placeholder, or can we give multiple, like 1, 2, 3?
I just gave, na? Here, how many am I using?
No, sir. After that 1, then
This
2,
is not one
then
placeholder,
3.
na? Is this one placeholder? Your question was, can we give only one placeholder? Is this one placeholder or is this 2 placeholders?
Sir, after that curly braces, then comma, then curly braces, then 2, likewise.
Say that again. After
Sir,
the comma.
no, sir. In that inverted comma, after that
In quotes.
yes, sir. In quotes.
Huh.
After 1 we give comma, then inside curly braces we give 2, likewise.
So are you asking me how many can we give? What, I'm not
Yes.
understanding your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We can give as many as we want to. As many as you want to. See, I've given 2 of them here right now. If you're asking me, can I give 3 or 4 or 5 or 6? Answer is yes.
Okay, sir.
I just wanted to point out to you, you said that we are using only 1 here. We are not using 1 here. We are using 2 here. That is what my initial answer to you was. Okay. All right. Let me confuse you even further. not confuse you. Let me give you an alternate way of doing this. Now, see what I'm doing here in the second syntax. In the second syntax, I want to type out something like this. The value of, and I want to type out here ARR of I, right? I want to type out ARR of, 0, something like this is, and the actual value of this is the actual value here. That's what I want to type out. This is how I'm giving the output. Now, I'm going to use something called a string interpolation. With string interpolation, see how much easier it becomes. You give $1 at the beginning of the string. You give $1 at the beginning of the string, and whatever variables you want, you give them in curly brackets. For example, the value of ARR of, I'm giving this as I, right? Complete square bracket is, and ARR of I. So what am I actually using here in this case? What am I using here in this case? I'm actually using what? The variable itself is being used out here. So you don't need a placeholder. In this example earlier, you had to give the placeholders first, and then you had to give the values later. Now I'm saying directly give the variable in here. And to do that, okay, start off the string, before the string put in $1, and then whatever you put in curly brackets. See, I don't know if you realize this. When I added my curly brackets, see what happens when I added my curly brackets? This actually gave me IntelliSense as I'm typing it out. Okay, this actually gave me IntelliSense. So you see this? What is it showing me?
Yes, sir.
It's actually showing me the possible values that I can give out. So this here is an expression that you're giving in curly brackets, which will be evaluated. And this here is referred to as string interpolation. This technique, wherein you give $1 at the beginning, this is called as string interpolation. This, of course, the earlier method that we used was using placeholders. Right? Which would you prefer? I'm asking you all, which method would you?
Line number 25, string interpolation.
That's a little, easier to understand, or a little easier to use. Of course, the third option that you could have used, which I've not shown you, is string concatenation. And string concatenation again would be what? Using string concatenation, you're breaking up a string into smaller parts. Then you're doing a plus, and then a plus, and then a plus, and whatnot. So that I'm not showing you, but these are two options that you could have used. Output it gives you is the same. So let's say 1, 2, and 3. The value of, you see what has happened here? Look at the value of ARR of, what is the 0, 1, 2? That is the value of I. And is, and then the actual value that's coming from ARR of I. Are we clear on this, everybody? Questions, if any?
Hello, sir.
Hmm?
I didn't understand the console.read line, how it works.
Which line are you talking about? Are you talking about this
19.
line?
Yes, sir.
So
Console.read
console.read line, see what it returns. What is the return type of console.read line?
Yes, sir. String.
String. So whatever you are accepting from the user is being received as a string. But we don't want a string. We want to convert it to an integer. It's an array of integers.
Yes, sir. I mean, how it is accepting the above value, that
How is it accepting the value? Meaning,
because we are assigning the value to ARRI.
No, we are not directly assigning it. We are first accepting the value. So this function by itself, what have you been doing with readline? When you're doing readline, you're allowed to type out something and press enter. So that value that is being accepted as a string. Now
Yes.
that string value, I'm converting it to an integer. And then the converted value, I'm putting it into the ARR of 5.
Yes, sir, got it. Yes.
All right. May I carry on?
Yes, sir.
All right. So this is what we have done. Now I have purposely used the for loop here to display the values because I wanted to show you this. I had not shown you this before. I could have shown you this in a different example, but my purpose of writing a for loop here was to show you this. Now, when you are iterating through the array, rather than a for loop, a easier option is a for each loop. A for each loop does not use an index. The for loop uses an index. The for each loop, again, you would have seen it in different other languages as well. For each var item in collection. So collection here is my array ARR. Now if you look at my array, what is this an array of?
Integer
Integer.
data type.
Integers. So one element in that array will be an integer. Correct?
Sir. Yes.
So instead of
Yes,
saying
sir.
var, just to help you understand this code, okay, you could actually say for each int item in ARR. And int item now here does not require an index. This is the first item in the array. When you run the loop second time round, it will be the second item in the array, the third item in the array, and so on and so forth. So this does not use any indices, it does not use any subscripts. So if I have to print this now, I cannot rely on I. Here I was using I, right, to print the value. Here I'm directly giving the value. Console.writeLine item. Item here is the value that you're reading from the array. Now, when you write a for loop, the for loop is a read-only loop, meaning you cannot change this. So I could not have used this loop to accept values into the array. Because when you're iterating through it, when you're reading through it, this here is a read-only value. If I try doing this, for example, I said item is equal to 10, for example. This is not allowed out here. Why is this not allowed? Yeah, because this value here is a read-only,
Read-only.
right? So you cannot use the for each loop for accepting array elements, but you could of course use it for displaying them. So I'm doing the same thing, but this time I'm not giving that long sentence. I'm just displaying the values in the array one after the other. So 1, 2, and 3, right? And then this is the for each loop that ran. All right. This was the basics of accepting or displaying elements in an array. Any queries or questions regarding any of this? All right. We mentioned that all arrays here in .NET inherit from the array class, right? Now the array class has certain static methods that you can use out here, which will allow you to manipulate this array class. So let's look at some of the commonly used methods with this array class. Array dot, and we look at these methods. Now, when you're going through these in the lab, you'll find that some of these methods have angle brackets out here. Okay. And these methods which have angle brackets are using a concept called generics, which we haven't seen so far. And these methods that you're using out here mostly are used in link. So again, we have not gotten to link at this point of time. So ignore the methods that you see which have angle brackets. You can look at the other methods. Right? Okay. So let's look at array dot. So before we do binary search, let's try something like this. If you want to search an array for something, you have a method out here called index of. And index of takes two parameters. First is the array that you're searching, and secondly, the value that you're searching. So let's assume I'm looking for a value called 10. Now, what will be the return value from here? What is this returning?
Integer value.
Integer value.
Integer value.
Index
This will
value.
be the position where it was found. Now, what if it was not found? If it was not found, position returns to you a -1. So -1 here is a not found. Otherwise, what would it be? Otherwise, it will give you the index of the where the item was found. If the array has duplicate elements in there, then it will return to you the first occurrence of that element. Right? So that's what you can do for finding this out. Similar to index of is a last index of. And what do you understand by last index of? What do you think this would do?
Index
The
of
first
last occurrence.
first occurrence of from last.
Right. First occurrence from last, or last occurrence from first, whatever you want to call it. So if the element is being repeated multiple times, then it actually starts looking from the end. It goes in the reverse direction and finds the last occurrence of this. Okay. That brings us to the third search method that you have here, which is a binary search. Again, syntax is similar. Prerequisite though, for binary search to work, what will be the prerequisite?
Array must be sorted.
Array must be sorted.
Array must be in a sorted order. So if you have a sorted array, then use the binary search. Otherwise, use one of these two sequential searches to locate an element in the array. Okay. All right. Array.clear will clear the array. Right? If you look at array.clear, what is it taking as a parameter? First is the array that you want to clear. Secondly, the starting position. And thirdly, number of elements that you want to clear from the array. So let's say if I take array.length, that will give me total number of elements of the array. So what will this statement do for you? Array.clear, any guesses?
So deleting the elements in the array.
Remove the element.
So if it's an integer array, what will it do? If right now it's an integer array, what will it do in this case?
It will make empty the array.
So be more specific. Somebody said it will delete all the elements. Somebody is saying it will make empty. I'm asking a very specific question. If it's an integer array, then what will happen to the array?
It will replace with zeros.
Correct. So it will
Yes,
be
sir.
initialized to their default values, which is 0. If it was a string, then it will be a blank string. If it was, let's say, an object, then it will be null. So depending upon what type of data that you have in the array, it will set it to its default value. All right. Let's try out a few other things. You have array.copy. Array.copy allows you to copy from first array into the second array. So look at the parameters here. First is, of course, which array you want to copy from. That is the source array. Secondly, I don't have it here, but assuming I had an array 2, that will be the array that I want to copy it into. And thirdly, number of elements that you want to copy. So let's say I want to copy arr.length. All right. I don't have arr2. I can create arr2. What will this do for you? copy values from the first array to the second array. Now, while copying the elements, supposing, for example, there were 20 elements to be copied. And while copying the elements, it gave you an error on, let's say, the 11th element. So 10 elements got copied and the 11th one gave you an error. So if you're using array.copy, then it'll stop copying the moment an error is encountered, and it will leave the array half copied, meaning elements that did not give an error would, initial would be copied, but the moment the error occurs, the elements after that would not be copied. That's how copy works. Now, what if you want to have a transactional copy where either everything should be copied, or if it gives an error, then nothing should be copied. So it should not be leaving it half copied. What are we saying? Either it should completely work, or if an error occurs, then it should roll back everything. In such a case, you have a method called constraint copy. And constraint copy, see what it takes the parameter. Firstly, of course, the source array. Secondly, the source index. So let's say at what point you want to start copying the elements. Secondly, the destination array. So array 2, for example. Destination index. At what point in the array you want to start copying it. And finally, the number of elements to copy. So let's say I'm saying array.length. Okay. What is this doing for you? Copying from first array to the second array. But if an exception occurs, then what will it do? How many elements would be copied then?
Nothing.
No elements would be copied. And if an exception does not occur,
Then it will copy all the elements.
then all the elements would be copied.
But sir, but it's
That's the
totally
difference
depend on
between
the
copy and constraint copy. Yes, question.
Sir, but it is totally depend on the size of the existing.
The error could be due to different reasons. Let's say there's not enough memory. Let's say, it is, you're trying to copy. I'm just giving an example. Let's say you're trying to copy from an object array into an integer array. But the object array did not hold all integers. Right? So then whatever were integers were copied correctly, but what is not an integer could not be copied into an integer. So errors could be due to different reasons.
Yes. Sir.
All right. So we have tried copy. We have tried constraint copy, or we have spoken about them. I have not tried them. We'll be trying them in the lab. Create instance allows you to create an object of an array class, or not the array class, but your array out here itself. So here you're specifying the type. Type here is what data type you want to create the array of, and what should be the length of the array. So why have they given this create instance option when you can create an array directly like this, right? We can create an array directly like this. So why then use array.create instance? Now, certain .NET languages may not have a syntax for creating an array directly. So those .NET languages will depend upon array.create array to create an array for them. So array.create instance. In C#, we don't have the problem. So in C#, if you're creating an array, then what will happen? You'll be creating it this way. This is the easier way of doing it. Now, later we will see how we can use reflection. So if, for example, if you're writing code in such a manner that while at the time of writing code, you don't know what type of array needs to be created. And the type of array to be created is going to be specified at runtime. So in such situations also, you would need to use array.create instance. But in the most regular options that you're using for an array, for creating an array, like like you standard arrays that you're creating, you will not necessarily need to use create instance. All right. I'm not asking you to try that out. In C#, generally it's not required. In other languages, you may require this. All right. That brings us to the last two methods. Both of these are self-explanatory. I want you all, one of you all, to explain to me what array.sort will do. What will array.sort do?
So sort the method in ascending order.
Ascending
Correct.
order,
And what do you think array.reverse will do?
descending order, sir.
Not descending,
No, so reversing the sequence.
reversing the sequence of the array. So array.sort is different and array.reverse is different. Array.reverse is just, if the elements are, let's say, A, B, C, D, E, after reversing it, they become reverse, E to A in that case. They're not sorting it, it's just reversing the array elements. So please try these out on your own. I'm not, trying these out in any case. So you can call array.sort, and this is how you can call, array.reverse. Okay. These are the, methods of the array class. Do try them out, all of them, when you're in the lab.
So can we combine array.sort and array.binary search in a single line?
Yeah, so you do not in a single line. You first call array.sort, and array.binary search would be then sorting the array for you. Because if you look at array.sort, right, the return type is void.
The word.
You use it as a parameter inside that. So do it in two separate lines.
So we have an array.binary search, but we don't have an array.linear search. Why?
The index of is a linear search.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So this is how you would use these array functions. All right. So far, what you've been looking at was a single dimension array. If you'd like to create a multi-dimension array, you could do so in this manner. Let's say int ARR, and then given a comma to indicate number of dimensions. Now, if you don't give any comma, how many dimension array is it creating?
Single dimension.
Single dimension. So if you give one comma makes 2 dimensions. 2 commas means 3 dimensions. 3 commas means 4 dimensions. So whatever your number of dimensions, -1 will be the number of commas that you give. If you want to create a 1-dimension array, give 0 commas. Right? So you can create multi-dimensional arrays out here. I'll restrict myself to a 2-dimensional array. When you create a 2-dimensional array, you can logically think of it as rows and columns. Right? So int, 2-dimensional array, ARR is equal to new int of, let's say, 3, 2. How many rows and columns do we have here? How many rows? Think of this as 3 rows.
3 rows and 2 columns.
2 columns. To access the array elements, the first row array elements would be ARR of 0, 0 and
0, 1.
0, 1. Sorry. That's the first row. Okay, 2 columns. And then if you have to change this, now this becomes 1, and 2. Right? So these are the elements that you have out here. Before we write any code, let's just see a few properties of the array. Let's revisit these array properties. So we had seen length, right? ARR.length. We had seen length. What will this return here in this case? How many elements are there in the array?
So 6.
6. So here it's straight away 3 into 2, that's 6, right? Now, you also have something here called get length. Now with get length, you pass the dimension number. Like for example, if you said 0, 0 is the first dimension. So what is the length of the first dimension here? Length of the first dimension here is what?
3.
Is 3 elements. How many rows do you have? Is 3. So get length of 0 returns to you a value of 3. Similarly, if I want to get the length of the second dimension, so I would say get length of 1. What is 1 indicating here? 1 indicates
2.
the second dimension. 0 indicates the first dimension. And yes, the output here that you would get would be 2. Are we clear on this side? All right. It's like you have. Okay, before we do that, I should have done this one before. I should not have gone into these. There's a property here called rank. Rank tells you the number of dimensions in here. So how many dimensions do you have here? How many dimension array is there?
2.
2 dimensions.
Dimensional
Yeah.
array.
So this would actually return 2. Right?
Sir, please explain line number 74.
Line number
74. 4.
74. When you use length, array.length,
Yes.
you don't get individually what is the size of, how many rows are there, how many columns are there. You don't get that. You just get a multiplication of the two. Array.length will always, like if you look at this array, you will get it as what? 3 into 2. That's 6 you will get out.
Yes.
Now, when you're writing a loop, you need to write a nested loop for a 2-dimensional array. So
Yes,
you will
sir.
need to know how many elements are there in the first dimension. How many elements are there in the second dimension? You need to know that. So how do you get that? You get that with getLength. So getLength is a function in which you're passing the parameter which says, give me the length of the first dimension. The first dimension here is referred to as 0. The second
That's
dimension is referred to as 1. The third dimension will be referred to as 2. So this
Okay,
here,
so this is 3-dimension array there.
no, this is right now it's a 2-dimensional array.
Yeah.
So if you had a 3-dimensional array, you only tell me, how do I get the length of the third dimension?
Sir, get length 2.
2. If it's a 4-dimensional array, then get length of 3,
3.
carrying on that.
Yes. 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 Got it.
Now, just like you have get length, you also have get upper bound. Get upper bound. So upper bound is the last possible element of that dimension. So in this case, what is the last possible row? What is the last possible row number? What is the last row number? It goes from 0 to
2.
2. So this will be 2. So get upper bound will always be 1 less than get length. If length is 3, upper bound is, if length is 3,
2.
upper bound is 2.
2.
Supposing there are 3 elements, they are numbered from what? 0 to 2. Supposing length was 10. Length was 10. upper bound will be
9.
9. So it will always be 1 less than that. Are we clear on this?
Yes, sir.
So what is get upper bound of 1 going to return? I'm not writing it down, but if you write it down, get upper bound of 1. What will that
0.
return?
0, sir.
Sorry?
0.
How is
sir.
you getting,
1, 1,
getting the
1.
value of 0?
1, sir. 1.
1, no?
1.
Because the get length is returning 2. The upper bound will be 1. 0 to 1.
So I didn't get that.
Can you do minus?
Yes.
So if length is x, upper bound will be x minus 1. So if length was 2, what will be the upper bound?
X minus 2.
X minus 2 need, I think. X minus 1. So 2 minus 1, which is 1. See, look at this now. What is the upper bound of this? What is the last column number? What is the last column number? What is the last column number?
1.
1. That's what this would be. So if I did get upper bound of 1, this returns 1 for this array. Rohit, are you clear?
Yes.
Okay, now there is also get lower bound. Get lower bound. Lower bound will return what?
The first value.
The first index number. And get lower bound will always return 0. Agree?
Yes.
All arrays always start from where?
0.
All
0.
will start from 0. So even if you give get lower bound, your answer is always going to be 0. So generally you don't use lower bound. But if you have to write a loop, like for example, if you have to write this loop, instead of saying this equal to 0, you could have said what? You could have said get the lower bound of that. And it returns 0. So, which is why you generally don't use lower bound. But be aware of it. Lower bound will return 0. It is useful in other languages. Like for example, in VB.NET, you can have arrays starting from a number other than 0. So there it is useful to find out what is the lowest bound of the array. But in C#, all arrays will always start from 0. So get lower bound is not really very frequently needed in C#. All right. Now that we have seen this, help me write a loop for this. Help me write a loop. I want to accept the array elements. So for what I is equal to 0, I less than, instead of length, what will this be?
Get length.
So only get length. Give me the whole
Array
thing.
dot get length.
Array dot get length of what?
0.
Get length of 0. I plus plus. And similarly, a nested loop here which takes for j is equal to 0, j less than, what will this one be?
1.
Get length of 1.
1.
J plus plus. And let's accept the array elements. So console dot write. I'll take the same syntax like what I used out here. Sorry, here I had used it. Let me just copy paste this. Tell me what changes that we would make out here. Enter ARR of not just 0, this will be what? 0 and
0.
curly brackets 1, and this will be I comma
J.
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 right? Okay, and this of course changes to I comma j is equal to so and so. All right, I've used placeholders here because I was too lazy to copy paste the code and change it, but you can use string interpolation out there if you're more comfortable with that. So this is accepting the array elements. To display the array elements, let's use the other one. Let's use string interpolation out here. ARR of I, comma, curly brackets, J is ARR of I, comma, J. This is what you're doing with string interpolation. Are we clear on this? All right. Let's run this and see the output. Console.read line. Okay, I think it's running the why didn't it should have accepted this. What have I done wrong? Okay, I was just displaying the I thought it finished doing it. I didn't see this line at all. I need my specs. So AR enter array of 0, 0. Okay, before we do that, let's quickly confirm this. So you had, array dot length was 6, array dot rank was 2, get length was 3, get length of 1 was 2, get upper bound was 2, and get upper bound of the second one was 1. Okay, enter array elements. So let's say 0, 0. Let's make it, let's say 10, 11, 20, 21, 30, 31. And that's how you're getting it. All right. Now,
So-
all those, question.
What is the actual difference between console.write and console.write line?
The console.write does not add a /n.
Okay.
Okay. So we have seen how to work with a double dimension array. Now, this double dimension array that we are working with is not supporting any of those array methods. Array dot, all the methods that we saw, those methods only work with a single dimension array. So if you want to do any other algorithms on double dim arrays, then you need to write your own code. There are no inbuilt methods available there which allow you to work with those sort of things in a double dim array or in the multi-dim array. Let's put it that way. Okay. All right.
So can we use for each statement for printing 2D matrix?
Yes, you can, but without the row and column. So it will just go through all the items, but without without letting you know where one row has ended and where the other one has started. If for example, if you wrote a for each loop, what would the for each loop look like? For each, what is the collection? Here in this case is your array, ARR. One item in the array is what? Integer. And if you had to now print it, you just say console.writeLine item. But now there's no way of knowing where one row has ended and the other one is beginning. You can't do that here. So which is why I prefer working with a for loop rather than a for each loop. So I get to know where one row has ended, where the other one has begun. Okay.
Okay, sir.
But to answer your question, yes, you can. You can use a for each loop to iterate through it. All right.
So the methods of array class is available for multi-dimensional array as well, no?
Can you repeat your question? Methods of array class, I said, don't work for a multi-dimensional.
Don't work. Okay. Thank you, sir. Sorry.
All right. So let's take it further. So CDAC has, 5 students. Each student has 3 subjects or 3 marks that you want to store. Give me the size of this array, or give me how you would declare this array. There are 5 students. For each student, there are 3 marks. How will you declare this array?
So there will be 5 row and 3 columns.
So give me the syntax for declaring the array.
So
How will you declare it?
Integer bracket
square
comma
brackets with one comma.
5 3.
array arrow equal to new int 5.3.
Okay. CDAC has 2 batches. Each batch has, 5 students. And each student has 3 marks. Help me. What changes?
It will be 3-dimensional.
So before 5 we will put 2 or 2 comma 5.
5, 3. So that's a 3-dimensional array. Right. CDAC has 3 centers. Each center has 2 batches. Each batch has 5 students. Each student has 3 marks. So what changes?
Before 2 we will use 3.
Right? CDAC has, or is in, 3 cities, or let's make it 4 cities. Each city has 3 centers. Each center has 2 batches. Each batch has 5 students. Each student has 3 marks. So what changes now again?
4 comma 3.
Right? And I can keep going on like this. Right? I could say CDAC is there in 8 countries. Each country has 4 cities. Each city has whatever, 3 centers, and so on and so forth. Right? So number of dimensions can keep changing. You can keep increasing number of dimensions. If you want to try out examples of each of these, I mean, I've given you things to try out. Accept marks to so. If you want to try it out, okay. All that it means is what, one more nested for loop that you're adding out here for every additional dimension that you have. How do you know number of, how do you know number of cities? If you take up this, how do you know how many cities are there? Programmatically, how will you find that out?
Length 0.
Index of 0.
Get length for 0.
dot get length of 0.
0.
How do you know how many centers? Get length of 1. How do you know how many batches? Get length of 2, and so on and so forth. So you can keep finding this out and work with this. Okay. Now, is it necessary that each center, for example, has same number of students? Or each student, for example, has same number of, let's say, or each class has same number of, each batch has same number of students in the same batch. Is it necessary in this case?
No, sir.
Right? So you might have a situation where this might vary. So what if I wanted to create something like this? I'm saying that there are certain number of, let's say, batches. We don't know how many batches are there. And each batch has a variable number of students. Each batch has a variable number of students. Now, in such a case, you cannot have a fixed size array. Okay. We're going to create what is known as a jagged array. In a jagged array, each element is not uniformly formed. So, for example, you might have a situation like this. Right? Let's say, if I'm just taking into account the number of students in each batch, all right? And let's say in the first batch, there were 5 students. So the students are numbered from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? In the first batch, there were 5 students. In the second batch, let's say there were only 3 students. So you get it only up to 0, 1, 2. In the next batch, for example, let's say there were 6 students. Right? In the next batch, let's say there were 4 students. So the edges out here would keep changing. And this is referred to as a jagged array. A jagged array actually is an array of arrays. So what is this? What is this out here? If you look at this, this is an array. The highlighted section is the array. The second section again also is an array. The third section again also is an array. Fourth section here is also an array. And each of these, I mean, if you consider this, so it's like an array of arrays. So this whole thing is 1 unit. This whole thing is 1 unit. This whole thing is another unit. How many such units I have? I have 4 such units. So jagged array is an array of arrays. And the code that you write there and the way in which you declare it is different from what you work with normal multidimensional arrays. So let's see how we can create a jagged array. Class was 2. Okay, so let's say 3. Copy paste some code from my earlier examples. All right. So have a look at this now. So this is an example of an array of arrays. An array of arrays or a jagged array. So read it from right to left again. ARR is an array of integer arrays. Right? ARR is an array of integer arrays. When you say ARR is equal to new int of 4, right? Assuming I'm storing, number of batches, number of students, all right? Ignore each student having different marks, ignore that. Let's say number of batches, number of students. So when I'm saying 4, I'm saying like, let's say there are 4 batches, right? Now in each batch, I could have different number of students. So what have I done out here? In the first batch, I've got 3 students. In the second batch, this is an array of size 4. So I got 4 students. Again, I've got 3 students in the third batch and 3 students in the fourth batch. if you look at these elements, if you look at how these are numbered, for ARR of 0, they'll be numbered from where? These will be numbered from 0 to 2. So ARR of 0 up to ARR of 0 of 2. That's how you numbered the first one. Similarly, the second one, this changes slightly, and so on and so forth. So we have to write a loop now. Okay, I have to write a loop now. The outer loop is this one here. So this is not a double dim array. It's not a double dim array. What is this actually? It's an array of arrays. So it's only one array. It is only one array. So if you look at one array, here you're getting the array dot length out here. So array dot length would give you what in this case? If you look at this array parameter,
4.
right? So you're running a loop which goes from 0 up to 4 or 0 less than 4. So 0 to 3. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. That's what you're going to run. This is the loop that you're going to run, the outer loop. Now, the inner loop would depend upon what? How many elements you have created for each of these inner ones. So ARR of I, what is the ARR of I? Here it will be ARR of 0 or ARR of 1 or 2 or 3. Now this dot length, see this contains an array. So dot length of this would give you the number of elements that are there in the inner ones. So initially when you run it first time, it will be 3. Next time it will be 4, 2 and 3 again. So that's the difference out here. Do you see this? It's not ARR of I comma j. It's not that. It's ARR of I and then of j. That's how you're actually reading the values. So for a jagged array, your loops change, the way in which you wrote the code for that changes, and obviously the way in which you're accessing it also changes. All right. So take a minute to read through this code. This is accepting the values. I'll run it. I'll show you what's happening in there. I'll run it. Right. And the same loop, a similar loop to display the values. All right. So keep in mind now how many elements are there. There are 3, 4, 2, and 3. All right. 3, 4, 2, and 3. Right. Value for subscript 0, 0. Look at the subscripts on top, how they are going. Say 10, 20, 30. Now after this, what happens now? After this is over, then what is it going to change it to? From 10 to 13. So enter value for subscript 10, whatever, let's say 10, 20, 30, and 40. The next one would be from 20 to 21. Right? And finally from 30 to 32. Right? So if you notice, each of these arrays has a different set of values that you're accepting. This is how you're working with the jagged array. Questions, if any?
Please repeat the loop, sir.
Repeat the loop part.
For loop.
So I'm saying that first thing you have to understand that it is not a double dim array. If you understand that, then it's easy to understand a jagged array. Because in a double dim array, it will have fixed sizes. This is an array of arrays. That's the first thing you have to remember. So if it's only an array, earlier what we would take is an array of integers. Now we are saying it's an array and each element in the array is another array. Each element in the array is another array. So which is why when you're looping through this, you only take array dot length. So whatever size you're given here, 4 for example, this would be giving you that size. You don't have get length of 0, get length of 1. Get length of 1 will give you an error. If you check out the rank out here, rank is only 1. It's only a single dim array. It is an array, and each element in that array contains another array. So it's not an array of integers, it's an array of integer array. I told you always when you're reading this, read it from right to left. So if you understood that concept, then it becomes very, very easy to understand. So array.length is this 4. Now each element of the array, how do I refer to the first element of the array? ARR of I. Each element of this contains another array. And that other array's length is what I'm actually picking up. So it's now picking up, when you run this loop, it will pick up 3, 4, 2, and 3 one by one. And that's how my loop is running correctly. Also, please notice when you're accessing it, you will not access it as I, j. You will access it I of j. Right? Hopefully that's clear. Yes?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you need to practice this because these are not arrays that you work with normally. So practice this out. One of the assignments that I'm giving you is asking you to use a jagged array. Yeah. Any other queries or questions?
So what was real life example of this jagged array?
Of?
It's jagged array. Array of array.
Before I even started talking about the jagged array.
Yes, yes, you use a tool, but actually I missed that.
I said that in not all cases would always they be absolutely symmetrical. And I gave you the example of how CDAC could have different centers in different cities. Each center could have different number of batches. Each batch could have different number of students. So that I started off my explanation with the example.
So this will be case of multi-dimensional array, na?
Yes, but you change this, na? I'm saying, is it going to be fixed always? Will this always be fixed?
No, sir. No.
Are the number of students in Kharghar Center and Juhu Center, are they the same? I don't know. I'm asking.
Yes, yes, sir.
Exactly 125?
No, sir.
125 in both centers?
No, sir. It's different.
I don't know. I'm asking. I really don't know. I'm genuinely asking. Now, within that center also, there might be 2 batches. You might be broken up. It may not be 1 batch. It might be actually 2 batches. I don't know administratively how they have done that. But for example, now Pune CDAC doesn't have the same structure as Kharghar or Juhu, for example. They might have different number of things. Right? They have, I think, 250 students they have. But they are splitting them into 2 batches. So again, there is a difference out here.
Yes, sir. What?
All right. Questions, if any? Okay. So as I said, I will be giving you an assignment to work on. But before we do that, just one small thing. Let's say I had a class employee. Right? And okay, let's assume I didn't have any validations, just for the sake of doing this quickly. Now I want to create an array of employees. I want to create an array of employees. Help me create an array of employees. What would I do here in this case? Employee, square brackets, ARRMs is equal to new employee. And what is this now? What are we giving here when we are saying new employee? What are we doing here in this case?
Size of array.
This is the size of the array, right? Are we allocating any memory for the employee object itself?
No, sir.
What are we doing here when we say new? This is specifying the size of the array, but this is not allocating memory for the employee object itself. So what if I wanted to now accept these values? Help me run this. For int I is equal to 0, I less than ARRMs
Dot length.
dot length I plus plus. How do I refer to the first employee object?
ARRMs.
M's of
I
I.
is equal to
Yes. Carry on.
is equal to
Yeah.
then new employee.
Correct. Very good. So before you do anything else, you need to first allocate memory for this. You need to first allocate memory for this. And after you allocate memory for this, then you do the other code, whatever other code that you're doing. Are we getting this, everybody? So whenever you create an array of some object, remember this, that this new thing out here is not allocating memory for each of the individual objects. This is allocating memory for the array. This is specifying what should be the size of the array. Therefore, for each of these elements, what do you need to also do? You need to individually allocate memory for this is equal to new employee. Are we clear on this, everybody? And if you don't do this, then later when you try to access the element, then it gives you an error. But otherwise, this is what you will need to do. So again, in the assignment that's coming up, this is what is expected of you. Okay, so I'm not completing the code because I've asked you to do a few things in the assignment. And let me share that assignment, in fact, with you, because there is actually today you all are going to get a lot of love from me. Not just one assignment, but there is going to be more also. So let me first show you what I have for you in the first assignment. All right, so this is what the assignments are. You can read through this, and if there are any questions that you don't understand or whatever, you can ask me that right now. So first one itself, what am I asking you to do? Create an array of employee class objects, similar to what we just wrote in the code. Then accept details for all employees, display the employee with the highest salary. Then accept the employee number to be searched and display all the details for that employee. So this is the first thing that we're doing. The second thing that we are doing here is a jagged array example. CDAC has certain number of batches. Each batch has certain number of students, full stop. Right? Accept number of batches from the user, and for each batch, accept number of students. Create an array to store a mark for each student. So that means each student has one mark. Doesn't have multiple marks. It has only one mark. Right? Please notice what I'm asking you to do. I'm not asking you to create multiple marks for each student. Only one mark. So let's say his final marks, final percentage that he gets. Accept the marks and then display the marks. This is all that I'm asking you to do. So if you thought of this as a double dim array or a triple dim array, how will you declare the array? Forget about the jagged array. If it was a normal array where the number of batches, number of students was fixed, how will you define this? How will you define this? Give me the syntax for doing that. Yes.
So it will be a three-dimensional array.
Think and answer. That's why I'm not saying right or wrong. Does anyone have any other opinion? He's saying it's a three-dimensional array. Give me the syntax for this. If it's a three-dimensional array, give me the syntax.
Yeah, square
Batch, comma,
brackets,
student.
batch.
Sorry,
Batch, comma, student.
number of batches. So let's say I'm just saying 2 batches. Let's say each batch has 100 students, right? And what else? What will be there in the third one?
Marks.
Mark.
How many
Marks,
marks are there?
So 1.
Okay, so this is a three-dimensional array that you're creating. If you're saying that this is what it is, how will you access the? Let's make it a little more manageable number. Okay, let's say there are 3 students. How will you access the first student? ARR of
0, 0,
0, 0, 0. All right. How will you access the? Does the first student have any more details that you want to store? Does the first student have any more details that you want to store?
No.
No. Okay, then how will you access the second student?
0, 0, 1.
So 0, 1, 0.
1, 0. 0, 0, 1 is not possible.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any other mark for this student?
No, sir.
Okay. How will you access the third student?
0, 2, 0.
Okay, that's the third student. This is in the first batch. Second batch.
1, 0,
1, 0, 0.
0, 0.
Right. Now, can you do it in a better way?
So two-dimensional array is enough.
Yeah, two-dimensional array is enough. Because why? Into 1. No?
Single mark.
So how much is 2 into 3 into 1?
6.
6. Is it the same as 2 into 3?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
That 1 has no meaning. No? Why do you want to create an extra dimension for that 1? The same thing can be accepted as what? The same thing can be accepted as what? Give me how I could accept the same thing without doing this. I could do it this. The same thing can be done in this way. Yes or no? Agree?
So I
What
have
is
a doubt.
this? Yes.
So let's say we are not making an array of integer. Instead, we are doing it of string. So every
Why
batch
do you
will
want a
have a
string?
batch name.
Why do you want a
So,
string?
so just
Is the problem statement asking you for that?
okay, yeah, because
I can make it more complex also. No, I can say don't just store the marks. Store 3 marks. Store the name of every student. Store his address of every student. I can make it more complicated, but that is not what the problem
correct.
statement is saying. So I'm
So
asking you for this problem statement. What is it? What am I expecting? That is what my question is.
That's what I'm trying to explain. So batch will have. I am considering string because I have something in mind.
No, that's the point I'm making. I am asking you specifically for this problem. I can give you 25 variations of the same statement.
So yes, specifically for this problem.
Huh.
So batch will have a batch name, student will have a student name, and marks will have a marks. So we will need
required. Not required.
As in, so
not required. I'm not asking you to store that. I'm not asking you to store the student name and this, because it changes the meaning of the whole thing.
Okay.
So I am asking you to answer the question asked of you.
Okay. Okay, sir.
So I'm not denying what you're saying can be done. But that's for a different question. Problem statement is what? If I'm asking you, give me 2 plus 2, you can't tell me 2 plus 2 can also be written as 2 into 2. You get what I'm trying to say? The
Okay.
the problem statement is what I'm asking. So I'm saying, yes, you could write code like this, but since each element out of 0, 0 only has 1 mark, you can directly store marks like this itself,
Okay. Yes.
right? This and this in this particular example can be done this way. So that's what I'm asking you to consider when you are creating your array. What am I asking you to do? Create an array to store 1 mark for each student. It's not marks. It's not plural. That is where English also matters, not for you also. You are speaking very fluently. But I'm finding others struggling to even ask me a question in English. And I'm not going over that path all over again. Why you all are struggling. But you all are struggling to even put forth a grammatically correct English statement. When you all ask me a doubt, not even in the lab or wherever. And I've given up on trying to tell you. Okay, anyway, coming back to this. So this is what the second one had. I'm asking you to be aware of what is being asked of you. Now here we don't know how many batches, we don't know how many students. Each batch can have different number of students, but we do know that there is only 1 mark that you're accepting for this. So yes, it's a jagged array problem, and please solve it correctly. See how you can get it to work. The third question, of course, was create a struct of student and then create an array to accept marks for 5 students. So what I want to show you, what I want you all to see is what will be the difference when you create an array of, if you have got a class and you create an array of that class, and if you got a struct and you create an array of that struct, how will things be slightly different? So that's what I wanted you to illustrate with this example. And this is what is expected. I'll share this assignment, but I'll share it all together at the end of the day. All right. This is what is to be done in the lab. All right. All right. So I know we have to take class till 12 o'clock as scheduled, but this is a good time to take a break in terms of a logical break. I finished working with what I wanted to show you with arrays. So before I start on the new topic, this is a very good time to take a break. So we'll resume the session at 12:15, not at 12:30 like normal. 12:15, I'm starting with the session again. You have a half an hour break. Today's session is only up to 1:30. Okay. So see you after the break at 12:15. 12:15 sharp we start. Bye for now.
Ansana, I
Yes,
think I'm recording going on.
yeah. What time sir has mentioned?
12:15.
Students, are you back?
I think there's still about
Yes, ma'am.
2:30 of them.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Just wait for a minute or two for people to log in. There's still people who are joining.
I'll drop in a
29
line.
right now.
Sir, I'll drop in a line for that.
Yeah. Just wait. I'll wait for a minute or two for them to.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, get upper bound shows the last position of row or column, sir?
Get upper bound has an parameter in which you have to give which dimension you want it of. So if you want for the first dimension, you'll say get upper bound of 0. If you want for the second dimension, will be get upper bound of 1. So you can give whatever dimension, whatever if you are thinking of rows and columns, if row is 0, the column is 1, then you can get both.
Sir, actually, I'm confused. That's in a row or column, sir.
Okay. So let me share the screen. If your array is, let's say this way, int ARR of whatever is equal in square brackets ARR of whatever. Right. Now in this case, ARR dot get upper bound. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Now this is not by itself. You're giving in a number out here. So you're saying get upper bound of 0. This will return to you for the first dimension. The upper bound for that would be 4. But if you said get upper bound of 1, that will be for the second dimension. And that will be 7.
Yes, sir. Okay.
All right. Are we all here? Has no people are still joining 2:33. Okay, we are starting with the session. Let as and when people join in, they could join us.
Yes, sir.
Now the array that you work with was a fixed size array, right? The number of elements that you're giving in there initially when you give the array elements, after creating the array, it's not easy to resize the array dynamically. So with array, you follow generally static memory allocation. You already know beforehand how many elements are to be there and you create an array accordingly. Now, problem with arrays is that if you don't need that many elements, and it's a wastage of memory. If you're, let's say, creating an array of size 1000, but you're using only 100 elements, then the other 900 elements are being not used. So that's a waste. Or if you create an array of size 1000, if you end up needing more than 1000, then what do you do? So it becomes a problem with arrays in terms of knowing exactly how many elements you want. Where you know exactly number of elements beforehand, then that is okay. So rather than arrays, we'll be working with collections. And collections use dynamic memory allocation, where based on an item being added, you can increase the size of the collection. And you can, even remove elements from the collection, remove elements in between, add elements in between, insert elements in between. So collections are much more flexible than arrays, right? While working with collections, there are two types of collections that we'll be working with. One, the regular collections, and one which are generic collections. So I'm sure you've worked with generics in Java and you know the concept, or if you've worked with C++, you would have worked with templates in C++. So you know the concept of templates as well in C++. Now, before we get into collections in .NET, because you're going to be introduced to collections which use generics, we're going to first look at how generics works in .NET. Right? And as I said, generics is similar to what you have in Java, generics in Java, or templates in C++. the basic premise, so the basic concept of generics is that if you have multiple classes in which the code is the same, but only the data type is different, then rather than creating multiple different classes, you can create a single class and change the data type while you're creating an object of the class. So for example, if you said that, a class, the only change between two different classes is just a data type. So you create a generic class, and while creating an object of the class, you specify which data type you would like to include out. Let's take a small example of what we're just saying and see how this could be used. So let's assume I had a class which was, let's say, an int class. Okay, and this had functions which are general purpose functions. So let's say one of the functions there was a swap, for example, and this is how we would actually end up swapping two ints. Right? Okay. Tomorrow, if I had to redo this class and instead of an int, I wanted this to work with a string or with, let's say, a decimal, what would be the change here? Supposing I wanted to be a decimal, what would be the only change here in my code? Wherever you find int, replace that with decimal, right? And maybe call it a different name, let's say decimal class, right? If you had to work with a different data type, again, all that you're doing is what? Changing the data type. Instead of decimal, pick up a different data type, and the same code would work with different classes. So you might end up creating multiple classes like these, all of which have the same code, but just the data type is different. Now, in such a case, I'm going to create a generic class. Let's say my class, and specify that the data type that you're using in here is a generic data type. You create it in this manner using angle brackets, and you write it as my class of T. And what is my class of T? The T here is some data type that you'll be using in your code. It's not necessary that it has to be called T only. All right. It can be called as any data type. I mean, any variable name could be used, X, Y, Z, whatever the case might be. Wherever you're using the the data type that you want to change, like in this case, this was an int. In this case, this was a decimal. Instead of this decimal or instead of that int, I will replace this with the generic type that I'm using out here. So see what would happen here is I would write code in this manner. Now the T that I have here is going to be supplied when I'm creating an object of this class. And while creating an object of the class, let's say in main, for example, I could do something like this. My class of, and specify the actual type that you want out here. To replace the T with whatever you would like it to be. So my class of whatever, let's say if I wanted an integer, O is equal to new my class of int. Right? In this case, what have I done out here? I've said that the T data type should be replaced with what?
Integer.
For this particular object. And I can very easily do the same thing for the others as well. So for example, in this case, in the second case, I could make it a decimal, let's say O2, right? And so on and so forth. And I can give in different data types out here. So I'm eliminating the need to write multiple different classes by creating one single class with a generic data type. Are we clear on this? Any questions before we jump into the code? All right. So let me add a new project to this. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, can we have multiple data type there?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
T, S?
Yes. 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 All right. So I'm going in for a new project. Still a .NET Framework application, and I'm calling this generics. Right. I'll make this as my startup. All right. I have some code that I have already written down, so I'm going to speed up work by writing this code. Take a minute to look at this class. The class that I'm writing here is not a generic class. Okay. This is not a generic class, but I have simulated the code for a stack, for an integer stack. So just take a minute to read through the code. I'm going to ask you to help me with, what are the changes that I need to make out here. Okay. First question. What have I done out here? Internally, I'm storing it where? Into an integer array, right? So now my question to you is, what all am I doing out here? First question is, what is this doing? What is this actually?
It is a constructor in which we are passing the size of an array.
So I'm saying that my stack is an array-based stack. That means the fixed size stack. And how many elements I want in the stack would be received in the constructor. That's the first thing that I've done out here. To keep track of the current position, I've got a integer variable. And the two operations that you do with the stack, one is a push and
pop.
one is a pop. So when I'm pushing something, I am incrementing the position by 1 and storing the value. When I'm popping something, after I pop it, I am decrementing the position for that position. I've also kept a check for what? What is the check for?
So for stack full, if the size of the array is full.
Yeah, so if I exceed the size that I've given, then I'm throwing an exception which says stack full. And if there's nothing to pop, then I'm also giving an exception that, stack is empty. Right? So I'm not worried about this code. This is throwaway code. This is I'm sure you've written, much more complex code than this in your earlier sessions. Now, my question to you is this. Supposing if I wanted to, from an integer stack, I wanted to make this a string stack, a stack of strings, for example. Can you tell me what all changes should I need here? Of course, the name of the class and the constructor will need to match. But other than that, what are the changes that I'll need to have? Tell me line numbers. Tell me on which line number will I need to make a change. Supposing I wanted to support a stack of strings.
Everything will be
39 to
39.
39. So change the integer to a string. Next change. Line 40.
No, sir.
No.
42. 42.
40 is the size of the stack. So that is not going to be a string. But this, of course, would change. So this becomes this becomes a string. 44.
45.
No, no.
44, any change required?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, next change. Somebody said
45.
45. Any other change?
55.
51.
51, sir. 51. Return back.
51. So returning an int, I'm returning a string. So just by making these changes, I've got it as a, what do you say? Different class with similar code. Okay. All right. So now if I had to make this as a generic stack, this is just to show you what is happening. But if I have to make a generic stack, let's call this as, let's say, my stack. Can you tell me what are the changes that I will require here? This is where that I have a string that will need to be replaced and replaced with the generic type. So you start off with what? With these
Type argument, data type.
yeah, argument out here. We're saying what? That my stack of T. And my stack of T here, that T is a generic type that you're giving. Name can be anything, doesn't have to be T only. What are the changes that we'll need to make? Again, wherever you have string,
Line number
replace that with
T,
Number
sir.
16.
replace that with T.
T.
Right? So T, T, and T. Hopefully I've covered everything. Yeah. That's what we have done out here. Now, when you're creating an object of this class, I'm not going to work with integer stack and string stack. That was just to show you what is happening. Okay, I don't need those. If I have to create an object of the integer stack, how will I do that? Integer stack, let's say 1 is equal to new integer stack, and this takes what as a parameter?
Integer parameter. The size.
To
specify
size.
the size.
So I could give a size out here. So this is what I'm doing for the integer stack. String stack similarly will be what?
The same.
String stack O2 is equal to new string stack of whatever the size that you're giving, right? But I don't want these two lines. This is not what I want. Now, if I have to create a my stack of T, see what happens when I say my stack of. Now you're expected to replace the T with the data type that you want.
Whatever data type you want.
Correct. So my stack of int, let's say O1 is equal to new my stack of int, and then of course the value that you're passing to the construct. So you compare it with line number 13. This is what we have done for my stack of int. Similarly, if I had to create my stack of string, so this changes to my stack of string, let's say O2, and compare it with line number 14 is equal to new my stack of string of the size that you're giving out here. Now, if you looked at push and pop, what did push take as a parameter? Push
The
took
string.
no, T. It took T, the type T, and pop returned the type T. We're not giving it hard coded here. But when you start writing code here, when you said O1.push, all right, O1.push, you'll find that T has been replaced with an integer out here because you're given it as my stack of int. Similarly, if you looked at O2.push, O2.push now has been replaced with what? With a string. So in this case, it was an int, and in this case, it was a string. Let's try this. So push whatever, 10, 20, 30. Okay, what if I push another value? Right now, my code is going to give me an error. So if I try running this, the line number 19 is going to cause that exception to occur, which I've written in my code. Okay, which says stack full. Right? But if I pass 3 values, then there was no problem. So up to 3 values was not a problem. So this worked fine. Right? Okay, let's try popping the values. So console.writeLine O1.pop, and look at what pop is returning. Pop is also returning an integer.
Integer.
Right? So it has changed automatically. and you could actually go and pop these values. Right? If you try popping an extra value, then that would throw an exception. Right? Which says stack has been empty. But without the extra value, it works fine. All right. Let's try this with push whatever. Let's say A, push R, push whatever, bar, push bar, maybe. Right. I don't know. I suddenly felt the urge to do this anyway. So you got these values out here. And this is what we have. The same thing is working for different data types. And you can try these out with different data types as well, and this would work fine. Right. So my objective here is not to show you how a stack works. My objective is to show you how to write a generic class. Okay. Now, when you're creating generic classes or when you're creating using generics, you can use what are known as constraints. So let's look at some of these constraints. So I could say where t:class. So this is an example of a constraint. So if I said where t:class, it means that what I can pass to t can only be a dash. Fill in the blanks. Can only be a dash.
Class. Constraint of the class.
Another word.
Object.
Another word. What are all classes? All classes are dash type.
Instance.
Reference.
Reference
Type.
So what can I pass here to it? I can only pass a reference type. So if you come back to the code on top, this line is giving an error because now int being a value type will not be accepted. So I can restrict what can go in there. So what is this now doing? Where t:class, what is t? Must be a reference type only. You can't pass any other type. Right? Sorry. Now, just like you can give a t:class, okay, you can give this. What do you think the other one would be? What would be the other constraint? Instead of class, correct? And the correct answer will be what? Where t must be a
Value type.
Value type.
Right? So this is the second possible constraint that you can have. Where t:struct. Now, if I do this, what is happening here in this case? The string is not being accepted. Are we clear on this? So you can restrict this. Okay. The third constraint, what you can do is you can say where t:class name. So you're actually giving the name of a class, right? So for example, let's say if you had a class employee, you could say where t:employee. And here it must either be that class or any of its derived classes. So t must be the class specified or its derived classes. Are we clear on this? Any of these could be one of the two. Yes? Clear? So what are
Yes.
you giving here? This, you're not giving the word class name, you're actually giving the name of the class. And the restriction will be, it will only be either that class or any of the other derived classes of that class. Okay. Help me understand this one where T colon interface name. T must be what? T must be what?
Reference.
Interface name.
Interface.
Where T must be, you don't create an object of the interface, right?
Reference.
Reference of interface.
So what do?
Implemented class.
Correct. Where T must be a class that implements the specified interface. So you'll pass an object of some class which is implementing that interface. Right? Okay, I'll just put these two on top. Not that it makes any difference. And the fifth constraint, where T colon new. Right? So when do you do new something? When do you do new something?
Object creation.
Correct.
Get object.
And when you're doing that, what are you doing? You're actually calling the constructor.
Constructor.
So supposing in my code, I have given this, let's say, I'm just giving another example. Let's say class 1, I don't have class 1, obj is equal to new class 1. Sorry, new class 1. Supposing I've written code like this, and I decide to make this a generic type. So what will this change to? Instead of class 1 obj equal to new class 1, this now changes to what? T obj equal to new T. Correct? So you might end up writing code like this. Now, if you were to write code like this, then what is the prerequisite? What type of class will work and what type of class will not work?
Abstract class will not work.
No.
Because same class or it's type class.
Think and answer. If I'm saying T obj equal to new T, what type of classes will work and what type of classes will not work? For it to work, what will be a prerequisite?
Parent will work and child will not.
Mm-hmm.
Parent classes will work and child will not.
It has before constructors.
Correct. That is the second answer, is the one that I'm looking at. For this line of code to work, that class that you're passing here must have a no parameter constructor. If it doesn't have a no parameter constructor, then this line of code will not work. So what is the prerequisite? That the class must have a no parameter constructor. So how do you ensure that? How do you ensure this constraint that the class must have a no parameter? Right now it's giving me an error. It's saying I cannot write this code because I'm not sure what class will be there. So to do that, you'll have to put in this constraint where T colon new, which will ensure that any class that you're passing must have a no parent constructor. So if you look out here now, this works because you can do int I equal to new int. But this doesn't work because you can't do string O is equal to new string. You can't do that. So which is why this is working. So what is where T colon new? T must have a no parent constructor. And if that is the case, then this code would work. Right? You need this constraint if you're going to write code like this. I don't need it in my my stack class, but I might need it somewhere else. So this is the fifth possible constraint that you can have. So these are the 5 constraints that you have in your generic. Okay. Now you can combine constraints. So for example, I can do this where T colon, and what if I did this? What if I did this? What will this do? Tell me what it's looking out for.
It will accept this all.
Right. So what are the three things that you have? T must be either that class or a derived class, and it must have implemented that interface, and it also should have a
No param constructor.
No
no parameter construct. So if all these conditions are true, then it will accept it. Otherwise, it won't accept it. Right? So you can combine constraint, but you can't obviously. I mean, opposites obviously will not work. So, for example, I can't do this where T colon class comma struct. What will this mean? It must be a reference type, and it also must be a
Value type.
value type. There is no such type out here. So this obviously, something like this will not work. Are we clear on this, everybody? Make sure that they don't conflict with each other. Otherwise, you can combine constraints. Clear on this, everybody? So this is how you can create a generic class and specify constraints on that. What can you pass out to that? Most of the times when you're writing code in .NET, you will not be creating the generic classes. You will not be creating the generic classes. Instead, most of the time, you will be using generic classes and you'll be creating an object of that generic class. That's what you'll be doing in most of the cases. Right? So, get used to this syntax. This is something that we'll be doing quite often. All right? Clear on this, everybody? Let's move away from generics. We had actually gone into generics because we wanted to use generics in connections. So now that we have understood how generics works or what is generics, we will use it in connections. But before we go there, somebody was supposed to remind me something.
So nullable. Generics and null. Nullable types.
Yeah, thank you. Right, so you all remember, good. So remember you created a nullable type int question mark, sorry. A is equal to 100, let's say. So this created a nullable type. What does the nullable type do?
It allows the null value also.
Accepts null.
Yes.
Value types can hold null value.
Right. Now internally, when you do this, when you write this line of code, internally it's converting it to this nullable. So there's a struct called nullable of type, whatever type, in this case, let's say int, whatever, let's say b, right, is equal to 100. So this line of code is converted to this line of code by the compiler. So what is it doing here? It's saying that it's using nullable and passing it an int. So if you look at the class nullable, you see this. It's actually not a class. I keep saying it's a class. It's actually a struct. If you look at a struct here, what is the restriction they have given out here? Public struct nullable of t, where what?
Only struct can be passed.
Only structs can be passed. Where t colon struct. Also, what are the properties it has? Has value. Remember these, when we use nullable, we are using this. Get value or default, get value of default with the data type that you are using out here. So this is actually how it's treating it out here. So when you're using int question mark a, internally, this is how it's converting it. This is how it's converting it. In fact, C# gives you the syntax of int, question mark, whatever. Certain other .NET languages do not give you that syntax. So there you have to create a nullable type in what way? You have to create it like line number 36. Okay. So I just wanted to show you that when you're using nullable, it is actually using generics to generate the code for you. So that's what I wanted to show you. All right. Let's move away from generics and we're going to go into Excel. And we're going to see in Excel the different collections that we can have. So that's the Excel file that I opened out here for you. So we said just before we got into this discussion, when would you use collections rather than arrays? Why would you use collections? What is the key point in collections?
Size is growable.
Right? They're more flexible. Dynamic memory allocation. You can keep adding elements, removing elements, right? Inserting elements in between, and so on and so forth. Now there are two types of collections that you have in .NET. You have the non-generic collections and you have the generic collections. So let's first look at the non-generic ones. All these non-generic collections are available in system.collections namespace. So this is where all these collections would be stored. All these classes and interfaces that you have. All collections implement the iCollection interface either directly or indirectly. So the iCollection interface contains standard properties and methods that are available to all collections. Are we clear on this, everybody? The iCollection interface inherits from the IEnumerable interface. And the IEnumerable interface allows you to enumerate through objects. So when I'm saying enumerate through objects, basically, writing a for each loop, for example. So we saw the for each loop for an array. The array class also is implementing the IEnumerable. Therefore, the for each loop works on that. And what am I also saying? That your iCollection interface inherits from IEnumerable. So all the methods that are there in IEnumerable will also be available in iCollection. And therefore, all collections will support enumeration, will support the for each loop, and you can use it to loop through the collection. All right. So what you see in blue, whatever I've given here in blue and beginning with the letter I, these are all interfaces. All right. An example of some class that implements iCollection is the stack class or the queue class. Both of these implement iCollection. So we need not write our own stack class like I did in my previous example. That was just to explain to you how things work. So there is an inbuilt existing class that's available and you can actually use that. There are now two specific types of collections, an iList and an iDictionary. The iList or the list basically is based on a list of items. And only, you keep adding those items into the list. So it's like an array. Supposing you wanted an array of integers, for example, you keep adding, integers into the array. Similarly here, whatever options you want, you can actually create a list of such items. Additionally, you also have a dictionary-based collection. So the interface that, inherits from iCollection here is iList for all lists and is iDictionary for all dictionaries. the dictionary always has, two things stored in there. Each entry in a dictionary has two things stored in there. There is a key and a value. So when you enter a value into a dictionary, you have both options. The key that you're entering needs to be unique in the dictionary. You should be able to identify that element with the help of the key. And the value, right? The value out there is the actual value that you'd like to store out there. So key value pair is what you're storing in the dictionary. The ones that I've listed out in black out there, those are all classes that implement that particular interface. So array list, for example, is an example of a class that implements the iList interface. And hash table and sorted list are examples of classes that implement iDictionary. Right? We'll be looking at these in our code. We'll be trying out these examples in our code and seeing how we can actually create objects with these different classes. All right. Now this, what we saw, all of this in system.collections, all of these are what type of collections? These are the non-generic collections. You also have the generic collections, but we'll look at these after we have seen these. Right? Let's jump into the code. Collections, again, something that you have worked with before. So you should be aware of them, and a lot of the concepts are similar here as well. So we're going in for a new project. Let me start off by creating an array list. I'll start off with this example. So that's the closest that you have to an array, for example. Now, where would you find all these classes and these interfaces in which namespace? Yeah.
System.collection.
System.collection. So I need to add a using on system.collections, and only then I can use them. Let's start with an array list. Let's say array list O is equal to new array list. Right? Typically, when you work with collections, all collections will give you three standard options out here. First is adding something to a collection. So there'll be a method like add, which allows you to add to a collection. Secondly, removing something from a collection. So there would be a method called remove, or a slight variation of that is remove at, which will allow you to remove something from the collection. And the third thing that every collection would generally have is a count, is a property called count, which tells you total number of elements that are there in that collection. So moment I say the word collection, in your mind, there should be three things that will always work. What are the three things for a collection? Add, remove, and count. So it's like, when I say the word collection, this is a collection. In your mind, three light bulbs should go on. Ting, ting, ting. Add, remove, count. Add, remove, count. There should be, okay. Collection. Ting, ting, ting. Are we clear on this? All right. Let's try working with the array list. O dot. Let's start with add. What does it take as a parameter? Look at what it takes.
Object.
Object. So here the array list actually accepts anything in here. It's not restricted. It's not, you can't say I want to create an array list of only integers or only strings or only a specific data type. And when you create an array list, it takes up everything. Any object can be passed. So I could, for example, pass a string. I could do any other data type. right? Whatever data types you want, you could actually pass that. One property that you will, use, as I said here, would be what? Object dot count will tell you what total number of elements in that array is. So if you run this, you get 3 as your count. And these are 3 elements that you have out here. If you'd like to display the array elements, you can either use a for loop or a for each loop. Generally, while working with collections, the preferred option is a for each loop. So for each, what is the collection that we have here? What is the name of the collection?
Array list.
Array list.
The reference array list what? O.
Oh,
And what is this a collection of? What are you able to add to the collection? What does it contain? Collection of what?
So variable data types.
Of objects. Remember when we said object dot collection dot add, it took an object as a parameter. So one element in there, one item in there will be what? One item in there will be a object.
Object.
Right? So let's try printing this console.writeLine and item. Right? So this prints out all the values out there. Right? So 3, of course, was the number of elements and then the other values. Let's try removing something from a collection. To remove something from a collection, O dot, you have 2 methods out here, remove or remove at. So see what remove takes as a parameter. Remove takes what? Object. So whatever you'd like to remove, like for example, if I said 10, this is removing this element from the collection. On the other hand, you could also use remove at. And what does remove at take as a parameter? Look at this.
Index.
Int index. So this gives you the index of that item. So what will remove at 0 do? Remove at 0 will remove what?
Vikram.
Implement add 0 index.
The first element out there. Index number 0. What if I tried this? Remove at 10. Will it remove this? Supposing this is not there. Remove at 10. Will it remove this?
No.
No,
sir.
What will it try to do?
Search for the 10th index.
Yeah, for the 10th index. So be careful about when you're using remove and remove at. Remove at requires the index out there. Okay. So try these out. I'm not running this. You can try running this and see how it works. Let's look at the other methods that are available here. You have an add range and see what add range takes as a parameter. What is it taking?
I collection.
It's not a collection, it's I collection. What is I collection? That's your interface I collection. Which of these classes implement I collection?
stack and queue.
Stack and queue.
Only stack and queue.
Array list, hash table.
Array list, hash table, and
All of them. All of them. Why all of them? Because iList inherits from I collection. So all the methods of I collection are also available in iList. So all the classes implement I collection. So when you say add range, what can you pass here? You can pass any collection object, right? Let's assume you created another array list called O2. So if I did O2, what will this do for me? O2 being another array list. What will it do? Yes. What will it do? I want you all to give me the answers. Very easy answers instead of me giving you answers. What will it do?
So it will add the element of O2 into O.
Correct. It will add all the elements that are there in O2. It will add them into O at the end of the list. So supposing O2 had 5 elements, it'll add those 5 elements at the end of O. Are we clear on this? All right. Now, instead of using add adds it at the end of the list, you could use insert. And insert takes two parameters, takes the index and the object. Index is what? At what position you want to add, and the object, that supposing you wanted to add a new element out here, whatever, ABC for example. Where will this be added?
At the first position.
At 0th index.
At the first position, and the other elements should be pushed down. Just like you have insert, you also have insert range. So what do you think insert range will take as a parameter? Insert range, what will it take as a parameter?
Index and object.
Starting index.
Correct. So index and the I collection. So you could try doing this, insert range O comma O2, where O2 being another array list that you have created out here. So you can add elements in this. Right. Let's look at remove. There's a remove range. Any guesses what remove range will do? What do you think remove range will take? What do you think it will take? Well, I need your answers. I mean, I know you all know these answers.
2 index number.
So it will remove range, will remove multiple items at one time. First, of course, it takes the start position where you want to remove it from. And secondly, number of items that you want to remove. So if I said 0, 2, how, what will it do now? Assuming you not removed anything else, which will it remove 0, 2?
All 3 of them.
The
It will
first
remove
two,
all.
not remove.
Sir, it will remove the 2 elements from the 0th position.
2 elements, no?
Okay.
2 elements, not all. Why would it remove all? This is not the index number. This is how many items. This is the count of items that we remove. So starting from 0, remove 2 items. 2 items here are this one and this one. Okay, so you need to try out all these methods, just that you are clear about all of these. O.clear. What do you think this should do? O.clear. What will this do?
It will remove all.
Remove all the elements. Right? So what is the difference between clear in a collection and clear in an array? Array also had clear, collection also had clear.
In array, it will be assigned default values.
Correct.
In collection, it will be cleared directly.
Okay. So in collection, it's like a remove all. But in an array, it just goes and reinitializes them to the default values. All right. Let's look at some of the other methods. So we've tried add range. You will find some methods with a down arrow out here. Okay, to the left of it, you see the symbol. There's a down arrow shown out there. Now these methods are again extension methods, and these methods will be useful when we are doing link. So for now, ignore all these methods. Whatever you see with a down arrow, ignore those methods. Don't use them right now. We'll use them when we are using link. All right. So we've tried out clear. Cloning again is a concept that you probably would have tried in Java. Have you tried cloning in Java?
Yes, sir, object cloning.
Yeah. So this also here also supports cloning. When you're doing cloning, there is something called as a shallow copy and a deep copy. So I'm not covering cloning. Cloning is beyond the scope of what I need to cover. But I'd like you all to read up on cloning. In case you already don't know how cloning works, then please read up on that and then you can try this out. I'm not covering that for you. Okay. But you could actually clone a array list. And two concepts: shallow copy, shallow cloning, and deep cloning. I will ask you questions on this in a later session. So let's see how many of you will read up on that. Make a note to yourself. All right. Contains. What do you think contains does? Contains. What do you think that tells you?
Searching.
So iter the values.
If present or not.
It returns a Boolean value. Will return true if what you're trying to search for, if it is there in the array list, it returns true. If it is not there, it returns false. So for example, if I did this Boolean, answer, for example, is equal to O dot contains, and let's say I'm trying to look out for the value 10. Is 10 there in the array list?
Yes.
Yes.
Is 10 there in the array list? Yes. So what will this return to you in this case? Answer will now contain
True.
true. But if I had given a value that was not in the array list,
False.
False.
then it would return a false. Now you also have, now this is just telling you true or false. You also have those three methods that we tried with the array. One is index of, second one is last index of, and third is binary search. You remember those methods?
Yes, sir.
Right? We discussed this when we were doing arrays. So these three methods work the same way, like what they did in the array. Syntax is same, usage is same. All right. I'm not doing that here. You can actually do that. All right. Let's see a few of the other methods. All right. Copy to. Copy to allows you to copy from an array list into an array. See the parameter what copy to takes. What is this taking here? Yeah. Array. So if you want to convert from an array list to an array, you can do that. Obviously, the array needs to be there in place. So copy to, let's say I would like to copy to an array out here, assuming you have created an array. What should be the size of the array that you create? Let's assume you're trying this example. What should be the size of the array? You're copying from an array list into an array. What should be the size of the array?
Same as array list.
How do you get this? How do you get that as same as the array list?
ARR.length.
The array list dot
length.
O dot length.
Dot
Length.
Size.
Dot length or dot size.
Size. Count.
count.
Yes, count.
Ting ting ting. What is the ting 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 in case of a collection?
Add remove count.
Add remove count. You're going to be throughout your code in .NET. You're going to be working with collections throughout. Similar things you will do in collections. Same methods you will call. Similar methods you will call. So don't forget this. Collections is one of the most important topics in .NET. You should be really solid on collections. Otherwise, you'll struggle in your code later. Okay. And even in interviews, even in exams, there would be questions asked on collections. Right. So please prepare collections well. I'm not joking. You're going to be needing this throughout your code. All right. So we just tried copy to O dot. All right. Get range. Get range. See what it returns. See what it's returning on the left hand side.
Array list.
An array list. So if you want a part of an array list, if you want a part of the array list. So for example, let's say if I said array list, let's say O3, let's say, is equal to O dot get range. And look at the parameters for this. First, this starting point. Let's say I'm giving this as 0 and number of items. So let's say I'm giving this as 2. So what will this give me now? What will happen now? The array list O3 will contain the first two elements, 0 and 2. Starting from 0, give me 2 elements. Are we clear on this? So you can then print the array list O3. Okay, we have talked about index of, talked about insert range.
There
Ignore
is
these
some
three.
capacity also.
Yeah, there is. Ignore the fixed size is read only and is synchronized. Ignore this, right? This fixed size tells you the array list has a fixed size or not. Now this will always return a false. Array list does not have a fixed size. You can expand this. So ignore this. This is read only, whether the array list is read only or not. So this will also return false. So ignore this. And is synchronized when you're using it in threading. So when we talk about threading, we can talk about synchronization. For now, ignore this. Last index of we have seen, remove at we have seen, remove range we have talked about. These other two methods are same as arrays. What are these two? Reverse and sort. What are these two doing? Sort is
in doing it ascending
sorting
order.
the array list.
Sorting the array list in ascending
And
order.
reverse is
Reversing the sequence.
elements. So similar to an array. Now set range is if you wanted to overwrite some elements of the array list. So for example, if I did dot set range starting from index 0 and let's say from I collection again, what you can pass it any collection. So let's say I passed it O2 being another array list. Now let's say O2 had 3 elements. So the first 3 elements of O, not 0, sir. Yeah, 0, correct. The first 3 elements of O will be overwritten by the 3 elements of O2. So set range is overwriting the values in O from the values in O2. O2 values will be put onto O, will be overwriting those values. Are we clear on this? You're going to try out all these methods. You need to try out and see how these work. All right. So that was reverse, set range, sort. Sync root also ignore. Right. This square bracket, this is actually an indexer. I have not covered indexers with you. But what you can do is you can access the array list in this manner. You can say O of some value. Let's say if I said O of 0, what will this give me? O of
ABC.
0. What? First element.
First index of array list.
So you can treat an array list like an array using a subscript. And to do that, it requires an indexer, which is what this is showing. So this is an example of an indexer. And we'll cover indexers a little later. I should have actually done that first, but somehow it has got skipped by. So I will cover it in a later session. All right. So this is what you could do with that O dot this. Right. Okay. Now there's one more method called toArray. Object dot toArray. Now this also copies it to an array list, from an array list to an array, but the usage is different. What is the other method that we use which allowed you to copy the values to an array?
Copy to.
Copy to. So if you look at copy to took an array as a parameter. Where is it? Yeah, line number 30. Copy to took an array as a parameter. But this on the other hand, which says toArray, right? Which says toArray is returning an object array. So on my left hand side, I would now have this object square bracket, let's say ARR is equal to O dot toArray. Are we clear on this? This is how you would use this. Usage is different. Okay, but both of them are copying into an array. All right, that brings me to the trim to size. Now, let's assume, not here, of course, you can't try this code out. Let's assume you are writing some code which is, let's say, adding items to an array list in a loop. So one by one, you're adding items to an array list in a loop. And the loop could be something like this. Let's say read records from database in a loop, and let's say add one item or one element to an array list. Let's assume you're doing this. This is the pseudocode that you're writing. Okay. Obviously, when you're later doing the code with databases, you can replace that with your actual database code. Now, in such a situation, what it does is every time you add an item to an array list, right? Every time you add an item to an array list, it allocates some memory for the array list. Okay. Now, this memory allocation that happens, it doesn't just allocate memory for one item at a time. It might allocate memory for more than one item at a time. Okay. Now, why does it do that? It takes an approximate value. It doesn't know how much memory you need. It will take some approximate value and say, I will allocate some memory for this. Now, if you're going to do this in a loop, that means every time in the loop, what are you doing? Supposing you're adding 10,000 records. What are you doing 10,000 times? What are you doing 10,000 times? You are reallocating memory, right? If you'll have worked with linked lists, right? So if you're doing a malloc, for example, I can see you would do a malloc. If you're adding memory out there, so you're doing this in loop, you're doing it continuously, one by one, you're adding these elements. Now that can be a slow process because every time you're doing what, you're adding only one item, and it's only allocating memory for that. Now it might allocate some extra memory as well. Okay, but that's besides the point. Now this code can be optimized by saying that instead of adding only one item at one time, add what? Add enough memory for what? For how many records? How many records would you add memory for? Yes, what could you do? Instead of doing one at a time, what could you do? How many could you add? How much memory could you add? Supposing there are 1,000 records. One possibility is you can add values for one record at a time, 1,000 times. Either you could do that. Or second possibility is what?
At once we can.
At once.
So how many records would you allocate memory for?
1,000 records.
How many would you do that? Based on the number of records that you have in your database, based on your record count.
Yes.
So what you do here is, before you start the loop, you set the capacity. Okay, you set the capacity, not the count. Count is the actual number of items. You set the capacity, and capacity will be equal to number of records in the database. Right? Now, by setting the capacity once, the advantage that you get is it's not repeatedly doing this multiple times. Right? And then you go ahead and keep adding items out here. So it's not reallocating memory every time, and your code would run much faster. Now at the end of this loop, there is a possibility that there might be certain extra capacity added, because it's not very easy for it to calculate what is the exact capacity. So it may sometimes add additional items for it. If you say 1000, it will not only add 1000, it might add 1024. It may do that. It will definitely be more than 1000, but it might be slightly more than that. So at the end of the loop, what you need to do here is the method here called trim to size. And what this does is it removes that extra capacity that has been added out here. All right. So if after the loop, if there was excess capacity, trim to size is removing that extra capacity. And this sort of code that you write is standard code, or you should be writing such code when you're reading a value from a database. So what would you do before you start off? You will first find out how many records are there in the database. You will allocate that much capacity. Then you run a loop which is adding the items one at a time out here. And finally, at the end of the loop, you do a trim to size. So these are the two other methods that you need to use. So capacity and trim to size generally work together. Are we clear on this? Now you can't try this code out here. You can't try this code out here because I don't have a database or whatever. But you can create maybe a dummy. Maybe you can create an array, for example, right? And read the values from the array into the array list one at a time. And that's where you could try this. So instead of reading it from a database in a loop, what could you do? Read values from an array and keep adding it into an array list. To try doing that. To try this code out. I think I might have some code later, which uses this concept. I think I do, where I have actually put in timers out there. And I'm showing you how fast the code runs if you set the capacity and if you don't set the capacity, and how it makes a difference. So I'll show you that code again later. But for now, this is what I'm actually asking you to know about. All right. Okay. How time flew, I really didn't realize. So anyway, this was an array list. There are a lot more classes that we have to cover. I was hoping to cover at least the non-generic collections today, but I will have to stop here for the day. Do try out array lists. All right. Do try out the methods from the array list. I'm not giving any assignment on collections. I'll give you once I finish collections, then I'll give you an assignment. So that will happen tomorrow. All right. Any questions, any doubts before we disconnect?
Sir. Hello, sir.
Hmm?
Sir, in C# means primitive to object, how it will be converted implicitly? Means like in Java, there are wrapper class concept. So in C#, converting primitive data into object means in array list.
There is, yeah. So there is boxing happening out
here. Yes. Sir. So
when you
like
do that, there is boxing. Like when you did this o.add 10.
Yes.
There's no explicit wrapper class out here. There are wrapper classes for different. I think somebody had asked me a question also about wrapper classes. There are wrapper classes for other things which perform. The wrapper classes are not only used in this context. So the question that was asked, are there wrapper classes in .NET? Of course, there are wrapper classes which will do, which will simplify the task for you. But here in this case, there is no wrapper class for converting it from an object, from an integer into an object. Here, what is it doing? It's simply doing boxing. Right?
Yes.
So o.add 10, it expects an object, but you're passing an integer. So it's doing a boxing out. And then later, when you're trying to read the value back, and let's say you try to put into an integer, there it will be unboxing.
Type question. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other queries? Okay, so we are stopping here for the day. There is a change of timings for tomorrow. Nisha ma'am will,
Yes, sir.
reconfirm the timings with y'all. So don't wake up late and come late for my session. We are starting earlier tomorrow. We're starting at 6:30 in the morning.
What?
Sir,
6:30 in the morning.
Sir, 6:30 is too early. It's too early, sir.
Okay, no, I'm joking. You can get the exact timings from her and please join in on time. So I will listen to you. I will not start at 6:30. I will start later than 6:30, but please be in time.
Seven.
Okay, now I'm listening to you. I said 6:30. You said no, later. I said okay, chalo, later.
So it must not 6:31.
Thank you,
No,
sir.
no, it's not 6:31. Okay, more reasonable time. All right. So see you all in the lab session in the evening, late evening. We have the lab session, so I'll see you all there. All right. Bye for now.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, students, I will stop the recording.